Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm Hojuana and today we are following up on the multi-species video from last year and examining the practical concerns of settings that include many different aliens living and working together. We begin with how to feed everybody, assuming everyone consumes food in a similar manner to us. The main difficulty here is that people from entirely different worlds will have entirely different dietary requirements. For simplicity's sake, much of sci-fi just glosses over this and has alien food be weird. In some cases there's a bit of basic representation of this concept though, such as in Mass Effect. The Turians and Quarians are both dextro-amino acid based, so their food either does nothing for lavo-amino acid based species like humans, or can cause dangerous allergic reactions, and vice versa. Turians and Quarians can share food between each other, but not with anyone else. As eating and sharing food together is a natural bonding point for humans who made this fictional world and want other humans to relate to it, it seems like consuming food in this manner is also a natural bonding point between these two species. This is magnified for Tali and Garrus specifically because they are the only ones aboard Normandy subject to this, most of the time. There is a logistical cost associated with supplying multiple different types of food in this manner. It's going to be far easier to supply a homogeneous crew that can all share food than one made up of multiple species where food needs to be divided. Resupply would be more difficult too. For example, stocking up on human-compatible food would be easy from a human station, but they may not have anything there for non-human crew. Assuming crew size stays the same for a heterogeneous crew compared to a homogeneous one, food stores wouldn't necessarily take up more space unless there were specific storage requirements. Think of it like a food hygiene thing, like not storing raw meat with vegetables. There's also the other end of the system, the waste that everyone creates. Can everyone use the same facilities? I'm sure there's other things to consider here, but let's not dwell. Another big concern is different atmospheric needs. What air one species lives in may not be livable for another. Avatar shows an example of this that's actually asymmetric. Humans cannot breathe Pandoran atmosphere, so require their own air supply, but Na'vi can tolerate the human air mixture for a short while. All the vehicles and buildings used by RDA on Pandora have to be sealed due to this atmosphere, making use of overpressure systems that run above ambient atmospheric pressure to ensure no inward leaks of the deadly atmosphere. Even then, there's plenty of emergency breather packs all over the place, either standalone units or making use of onboard air supply. Similar masks were a common sight on Babylon 5, as not every area of the station used the standard atmospheric mix that most species used. This means there were multiple life support systems in effect across the station, providing ventilation and processing and recycling for each area, which all have to be kept very separate from each other. This is easy enough on a huge station, but on a smaller ship this may be much more challenging. But using just masks may not be enough, as atmospheric pressure is also something to consider, as is the possibility that skin exposure may be dangerous in a given environment. Full suits will be needed in such situations, but those come with a whole host of potential issues, from maintenance to hygiene. Movement in senses can become limited, though this can be compensated by or enhanced with technology. Hands are an especially difficult thing for suits to deal with because surrounding fingers with protective gear makes them less dexterous. Not all atmospheres are necessarily dangerous though, just different enough that only a bit of acclimatization or decompression time is required. That doesn't mean they wouldn't be harmful on a long-term basis though, as we can see from Kepral's syndrome that many Drell are subject to. They come from a very arid world, so long-term exposure to environments with higher humidity damages their lungs. Many of those same problems also apply to fully liquid environments, which come with some other issues. The density of liquid is generally going to be higher than that of gas, and they may also be electrically conductive, creating technological challenges for flying around in a liquid-filled spacecraft. At least the different densities can lead to really simple interfaces between each working environment, assuming gravity stays stable. The next concern is temperature. Here on Earth there is significant variation in what living beings can live in which climate, not to mention the difference between warm-blooded endotherms and cold-blooded ectotherms. So mixing together species with wildly different operating temperatures is going to be a challenge. What may be comfortable for one species may be deadly to another, with an overlapping temperature range being barely workable for both, if it exists at all. As with atmospheres, technology can provide some solutions, such as clothing with insulative layers or built-in heating and cooling systems. These do still have their limits though, things like duration that the suit works for or how bulky they are. As mentioned before, hands are a particularly tough thing to make a suit around without rendering them useless, and wrapping them up in heating or cooling elements could very well do just that. Another challenging area is what gravity is everyone accustomed to. Sure, humans may have evolved in 1G, but we can tolerate above that for varying periods of time, and all the way down to effectively nothing in freefall. But living for extended periods outside of standard gravity does have negative effects. The way fluids flow, the way muscles and bones exist to counter a particular force, it's all based on living in 1G. If we want to live for extended periods in freefall, we need to counteract these negative effects through dietary supplements and exercise to stop from peeing our bones out, and such things would need to be done by a high gravity species living in standard gravity environments as well. This wasn't really covered by the L Core, but the Orville did bring this up with the Zerleans. Going the other way, species who are used to a lower level of gravity may require extensive technological assistance when living in a stronger gravity environment, like an exoskeleton or a magic gravity tech suit. As for providing different levels of gravity for everyone to live in, this is very easy to accomplish in assessing with generated gravity tech. Just be careful with transitioning between different gravity levels. It's also very possible to accomplish in a more realistic setting where spin gravity is in use, simply by having different levels on the same centrifuge. The further out from the center something is, the higher the apparent gravity, which can be achieved with a multi-layer centrifuge or a conical one. Great for space stations, but more difficult for small ships. In a vaguely related fashion is species size, which is a fairly self-explanatory problem. Everything from doorways to rooms has to be large enough to fit the biggest species, but then that makes things potentially high up out of the reach of smaller ones. Think of the size of objects or computer interfaces and such too. They may need to be built in multiple sizes just so everyone can use them. Language is another obvious element that needs to be considered. Yes, there's the simple thing of multiple languages being spoken, but what about entirely different ways of talking? The general way humans communicate is through our vocal system, by manipulating sound waves. But we also make extensive use of body language, not to mention how many different types of written language we've come up with. Alien life may not use such things at all, or have totally different methods that we cannot comprehend or even sense. For example, we cannot see ultraviolet light, but a species that can could make use of it for visual signaling. Then there's the more esoteric methods of communication, like the ink stains used by the heptapods from Arrival, or the hydrocarbons and lights used by species 10C. Not to mention psychic communication. How does that work across species with entirely different brains? The typical sci-fi thing is to just hand-wave it all away with a universal translator of sorts, or there is conveniently an interpreter there, which is fair enough, as without those things then the story rapidly becomes about learning to communicate, which may not be the intent of the creator. Healthcare for a wide variety of species is also going to be on the difficult side. Do you have healthcare specialists for every race? Or just one doctor that can handle everyone they are reasonably expected to treat? Sure, some things are going to be fairly universal, like keeping the insides on the inside, but how much medical school do all these sci-fi doctors go through? There's years of it just to be a doctor for humans. Surely there would be the equivalent of that for each new species a doctor would need to treat. Luckily, this is another place where technology can provide a leg up, with vast information banks and high-tech diagnosis and treatment equipment. But those things may not always be available. The same goes for supplies, things like spare blood, medicines, and tools. All of this is complicated even further by everything else we talked about previously, especially things like suits. If someone needs medical attention but you need to remove a suit that is keeping them alive, what do you do? As we can see, there's many complications in the typical sci-fi setting that has aliens all over the place, be they friends or enemies. There's plenty of fantastic opportunities here for world building or storytelling, so let me know some of your favourite examples in the comments below. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our Space Fighter design reference book. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by giving us super thanks or by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.